for being on the show. You know, it's pretty cool that you're going to be writing this book about GG Allen and that last show that he did over there. You know,
the notorious gas station show.
Yeah, he was something. So how long ago did you decided that you wanted to be a writer for writing books and stuff?
Well, it's a great question. I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was probably a teenager. And in various forms, I've written things over the years. But there's one thing I want to make clear about this particular book, and that is that I'm not writing it. It's going to be an oral history, which means that the folks I interview who've shared incredible stories with me and great impressions of Gigi, they're going to be the ones telling the story. And it's just going to be my job to, as I've been saying recently, collect it and curate it. So I'm really putting a book together more than writing it. And I like that because I only met Gigi one time in my life a long time ago, I can tell you about, but I'm talking to so many people who knew him better than I that I'd prefer to have them tell you who he was, and they're doing a great job so far.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Yeah, I happen to have seen a lot of people that were involved with that show, and
that gas station show.
Yeah, that gas station show.
First of all, for people who don't know, you were involved with that show, which is how we met, and you gave me some extraordinary information about that day. You know, the gas station show here in New York in the summer of 1993 wasn't just a crazy GG Allin show. It was his last show for people who aren't familiar with his history. He actually died that night or very, very early in the morning of the day following that show. So it's noteworthy in that respect. But also, and you can testify to this, Mike, it was just a crazy show. In fact, I would say, having watched dozens of videos of his shows and spoken with all kinds of people who went to GG shows, I've talked at this point to over 180 people.
A lot of people.
Oh, yeah. It's fun. I mean, people have been great, really very generous, great stories, sharing a lot about their own careers as well, which is interesting to me. But that show was really, really crazy compared to almost anything I've heard before. So there's much to tell about that show. It's certainly going to constitute a good-sized chunk of the end of the book.
So did you guys get enough material that you think eventually you'll be able to put it together and release it? Like, and how much more time do you think that would take?
Sure. I want to get the book out in the summer of 2026. That would be by the time of Gigi's 70th birthday. Believe it or not, he'd be 70 years old next year. We're all getting a little older, right? Spike,
Wow.
It's weird, right?
70.
I'm talking to everybody for this book, and we're talking like we're all 24, but we're all 64, you know?
Yeah.
Or at least in that ballpark. So it's
Gigi would still be at the nursing home throwing poop. Yep. Just
well,
with a deterioration of the mind condition instead of a stage antic.
Uses Depends as a slingshot, right?
Oh man.
I mean, I've talked to people who say Gigi never would have made it to 70 if he hadn't expired that night. You know, there's no way he wouldn't have died the following year. I guess it's impossible to know. Part of me kind of wishes that maybe he would have straightened out his act just enough to have some longevity. You know, and there were people encouraging him very much toward the end to try some different things that would be a little bit easier on him, because he abused the hell out of himself at those shows in the last few years, particularly. And it couldn't go on forever. He was 36 years old at the time he died, which is incredibly young for those of us who are well beyond those years. But also, it's not so young for being a rock and roller, you know what I mean, who's cutting himself, fighting people in the crowd. I mean, outside of the usual rigors of touring, he was really, really beating himself up. So maybe he would have settled into something that was a little bit more manageable while still making his statements, if that makes sense to you.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering, what's the craziest story you heard, and who was telling it for the book you're writing about GG Allen? I mean, everything is crazy, but there must have been something in your mind that was just over the top, beyond.
That's a great question, and I've heard so many crazy stories. It's hard for me to single one out. In a sense, though, some of the stories that interest me the most are some that seem like really surprising. Like nobody is surprised to know that Gigi did some crazy thing on stage. Everybody who's listening to this probably knows that he used to smash the microphone into his head and into his face. I mean, he broke several of his teeth before he went to prison, where he was in the early 90s, and he got medical, he got dental care there, so they pulled his teeth out. So toward the end, if you look hard, you can see he's missing his front teeth. I mean, he did so many crazy things at shows that nobody would probably be surprised to hear them, and in a sense, I should say this, Spike, it was a show to a certain extent. I'm not saying it was fake. I'm not saying he didn't believe in it, but a lot of those things he did show after show after show. So if you saw him in
his routine,
if you saw him in Atlanta, he was doing similar stuff that he did in Berkeley. He was doing similar stuff that he did in Austin, Texas, similar stuff that he did in Chicago. So in a way, after you've heard people tell you about 20 different shows, you're hearing a lot of the same stories. But I'll tell you a few things that people might be surprised to hear that aren't about craziness and violence. Although I just love this story for some reason, and other people, I don't know, maybe they won't think it's as interesting as it is to me. I know a guy was put in touch with a guy who's currently in Devo.
I love Devo.
Not one of the original members, but one of the original members of Devo passed on not too many years ago, and this fellow, whose name is Josh Hager, replaced him. And he said, "Hey, I have a GG Allin story." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's only one, but I'll tell you. When he was a teenager, his brother was involved in the music or in the radio business, and there was this big music and radio exposition in the Boston area. So Josh went to the show. I think he said he was 14, just to be around all these cool people who are involved with the music business, right? This is in the 80s. And he says he's running around a corner somewhere, and he bumps into a guy so hard that he falls over. Right? He's just a kid, like a freshman in high school or something. And the guy leans over, apologizes, helps him up. "Oh, hey, kid, are you okay? Let me help you up." Helps him up. And he looks up, and who is it? It's GG Allin.
Oh, man.
Now, this is the Gigi of the 1980s, right? He had that crazy bandana on his head. He hadn't shaved his head yet. Kind of had straggly hair, and he wore a lot of eye makeup and, crazy vests and stuff. Like, he definitely looked like a rock star and like a
touch of glam.
There you go. A touch of the glam mixed in it. Well, he was very influenced by glam as a kid. Alice Cooper, the New York Dolls, man, they were like heroes to him. So he still had some of that look going on. And he helps Josh up, and he's like, "Oh, gee, kid, are you okay? What's going on? Are you all right? I didn't hurt you." No. He says, "Okay." And he reaches and he gives him a 7-inch record. He's carrying them around, probably handing them out to people at the show, right? And I can't remember exactly what the record was. I should. Josh mentioned it to me, but it's literally like, the filthiest titles you've ever heard of, and this picture of Gigi like naked shooting up or something.
Oh, yeah.
So this is how Gigi tries to, tell this poor little kid that he's sorry they got into an accident by giving him what people today would consider to be like the most inappropriate record you could hand a 14-year-old kid. And, he obviously the kid loved it. There's another story a guy told me from around that same time where he was in a pizza place in Boston. And without getting too much into Boston music, Gigi, who was from New Hampshire, spent a lot of his early career hanging out around Boston. And this guy is in this pizza place after the bars close at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And a fight breaks out and someone throws a chair. And this guy swears to me, all of a sudden, someone reaches up and grabs this chair and knocks the chair out of the way. And he looks, and it's GG Allin. And it's Gigi. And so Gigi intervened to stop this guy from getting the shit kicked out of him in the middle of this pizza place when everybody's drunk after getting out of these nightclubs. So there was a Gigi, who was crazy on stage and who seemed like a dangerous psycho to people who were at these shows for a, some of them only lasted, as 10 minutes, right? Before
the police came.
Before the police came, before the club owner shut the thing down. I mean, that happened a lot. But there was also this Gigi who was weirdly a kind of strange, bigger than life, low grade superhero kind of figure who kind of like popped out of nowhere and did amazing things as well. Those stories really interest me because they weren't stories I expected to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, though, there was a time, even though we have the bloodshed and brutality for all era, there was a time he was signed to HumYn and Orange Records with this artist, Eddie Chris Group, and with the Runaways, Joan Jett artist. But yeah,
did you say Homestead Records?
Oh, HumYn Records and Orange, Orange Records.
Orange Records, yeah.
And he actually had not even thrown his first duty of poop or nothing.
No. That was something that came later.
Actually, just pretty straight and narrow guy doing the rock kind of little bit glam thing, and he was just rocking out
early in his career. First of all, Gigi was born in the mid 50s, right? So let's say in the early 70s, when the glam thing is coming along, Bowie, Alice Cooper. A little bit later, he probably heard about the New York Dolls. He thought those guys were great. I mean, he also loved the Stones, better known, more traditional music, but he went more for the underground. I mean, Alice Cooper wasn't exactly underground. He broke really big, but early on, you were pretty much into new stuff if you listened to Alice Cooper. So he had interesting taste in music. Does that make sense? Before there was punk.
Yeah.
And then when punk started to emerge, of course, he got interested in that. But at the same time, don't forget, he wasn't a kid. I was maybe, 15, 16 when I'm first hearing about the Sex Pistols and stuff, but he was well into his 20s, right? And he had all that background that I didn't have on these earlier groups, even like MC5, and he worked with a couple of the guys from MC5 early in his career. In fact, that's Orange Records. Orange Records was a guy named David Peel, who was based here in New York.
He's listed right on this record. It says Eddie Chris was singing, Wayne Kramer's lead guitar.
Yep.
David Peel's doing hand claps, but but he did recording, producer, and art director, and you got a Gary Dorfman, Frank Eaton, Jimmy Cross. Yeah, a lot of high, big names on this.
Yes, David Peel was part of what we might call the hippie underground.
Yippies.
Greenwich Village, East Village, and he became friendly with John Lennon, who saw him, playing in the park or something and thought he was cool.
Yep.
And that laid a foundation, I would say, for a career. I mean, you go around saying you're friends with John Lennon. It helped a lot, in the late 60s, early 70s. And Gigi, who corresponded with everybody in the world, going back to the time when he was a kid, he'd write away for everything in the backs of magazines. Don't forget, this is long before email, guys, right? So he's writing letters like crazy, and he made a connection with David Peel, and David Peel agreed to put him on his label. Now, David Peel's label was more of a way of attaching your project to his name than any big business. I'm not even sure he entirely distributed the records, but Gigi, was glad to make this first serious contact in the music industry. Yeah. And also David Peel introduced him to Wayne Kramer and Dennis Thompson from the MC5, right? Who were sort of freelancing. You just mentioned Wayne Kramer's name, and Wayne just passed away not long ago.
Yeah. A year ago.
And Gigi was so thrilled to come down to New York and actually cut a couple songs with a legendary guy like Wayne Kramer. So in those early years, in the early 80s, things were really looking up for Gigi. He was making big connections. Don't forget, too, if you're from the Boston area, and especially if you're from New Hampshire, north of Boston, like I am, I'm from New Hampshire, too. It's a big deal to come to New York and work with these, big shots. So Gigi had a real great break early on, for sure.
So in your mind, from interviewing numerous people throughout the study to do, compile the stuff you're going to write.
Yeah.
What was the breaking point that you thought turned Gigi into the poop throwing guy that I ended up knowing later in time?
That's a great question. Gigi's early performances with his original band called the Jabbers, right? He had done some stuff as a teenager, but really his first noteworthy band. Well, that's not quite true. He was in a band with his brother called Malpractice, and they actually played in a lot of clubs in New England when they were just like teenagers. So let's give them credit for that.
Yes.
But Gigi's first independent band was called the Jabbers, and they played all around the New England area. And they did a pretty crazy show, or at least Gigi did a pretty crazy show. So he would jump around and jump on tables and knock over beers and swing from pipes on the ceiling. And, it got crazy. And then there were some people who started to come to his shows regularly who are into it. So they would contribute to the craziness. There were a group of guys called the Goon Squad who would come purposefully just to attack Gigi and do crazy stuff in the club. So he did have a reputation, Spike, for doing a crazy show, but definitely not moving his bowels on stage.
Yeah.
Nothing along those lines. There are, different stories about where that idea came from, but let's just say by the later 80s is probably the first time he did something like that and incorporated it into a show. Where did it come from? Why did it get crazier? From a certain point of view, I think it was just a natural progression. He was always looking for some way to become more radical. And don't forget, and you were around, as the 80s wore on, people got used to what was far out 3 or 5 years earlier, right? That became normal. So just going to a show like a Black Flag show and slam dancing and jumping off the stage, that wasn't that radical by the later 80s.
You had to always outdo the other person. And
you got it
back and forth until it. How much further can you go?
Exactly.
Beyond Gigi's throwing the poop.
Exactly. Gigi, was always looking for some way to get noticed and to do something that was beyond, because he insisted on being more underground, was the term he used, than other groups. So where could he go? Now, I'm not saying he sat down one day and said, what's a list of crazy stuff I can do? Oh, I know. I'll poop on stage and throw to people. Like, it sort of happened semi-organically, right? But then when he did it, he recognized the impact. Like, people were freaked out, right?
Yeah.
And so then it became part of the show. In fact, you may know this, but your listeners may not. It became so much part of the show that what he would do before the show is go eat a bunch of X-Lax or some other laxative, right? And then eat a bunch of junk like Taco Bell or something to make sure he had plenty of ammunition and could move his bowels on purpose, on cue, when he got out on stage.
Very pleasant.
It became a thing that he purposefully did, show after show after show, and he had to prepare to do it. I mean, let's face it, you got to prepare a little bit if you want to make sure you can shit exactly at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. You know what I mean? So there's an element of planning eventually. And then as word went around, of course, that this is what this crazy guy does. He takes a dump on stage and it smears it on himself, right? And then he throws some at the crowd. Once word went around, then it became a thing he almost had to do, because all the kids are saying, did you hear about this man? Let's go see this guy, GG Allin. This is what he does. So I don't think he wanted to disappoint his fans, So he was still doing that right up to the end. In fact, he did it at the gas station show, that final performance.
Yeah. And originally, his intention was to put dynamite up his rear end, blow himself up and the audience.
Well, that's something that he may have said he was going to do. I'm not sure if it would have happened, but there was a claim that he was making a lot in the late 80s that he was going to kill himself on stage. He didn't specify exactly how, or he had different stories, but he widely spread this rumor that he generated that on Halloween night, 1990, he was going to kill himself, or was it 89 originally, that he was going to kill himself on stage. And that rumor went around. So there were people wondering if that would happen. There's a big question about what club, if any, would have booked him on that night, given what he said he was going to do. I certainly wouldn't have if I was running a club. But he actually wound up going to jail before it was supposed to happen. And so it didn't happen. And then when he got out, people challenged him on it. And he still said, I'm absolutely going to do it. He didn't want to be called out. I'm still going to do it, but it's not time. And when the time comes, I'll do it. He was even saying that, I think, on some of his final television interviews. You know, by the end, you probably
Yeah.
know he was on these famous talk shows and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So he did definitely insist he was going to kill himself on stage, and that would be like his ultimate stunt. Whether it would have happened, and I certainly hope that it wouldn't have happened. You know, it sort of got he sort of got cut off at the pass, and then when he reemerged out of jail as the Murder Junkies, there wasn't as much talk about that anymore.
So basically, there's just no going back for GG. That was it. Anybody you interviewed, they had no hope, and that was it. They were waiting for it to end.
What do you mean by waiting for it to end?
They just waiting for him to explode on stage, and that was the.
I mean,
thing.
there was this kind of, you know, what's that thing they say about people driving by an accident where somebody's head gets, you know, smashed in, and it's hard for most people not to look, right? GG was kind of capitalizing on that sense that if you thought you were going to see something outrageous, you might come to the show, right? Now, I'm not. GG was very sincere. You know, given what dozens and dozens of people have told me, he didn't spread around bullshit. Like, I think if he said he was going to kill himself on stage, it was something he was really thinking about doing at the time he was saying it. And even at one time, and it's a little sad, but probably sincere, he said it in an interview. You know, somebody said, "Are you really going to kill yourself on stage?" He said, "Hey, man, I'm living this horrible life and abusing myself so much, I might as well. It wouldn't be much worse." And I think he was sincere in a sense when he said that. You know, he was living a pretty rough life in the late 80s. And I think there were moments in his life when he thought, hell, killing myself would be better than this. So it wasn't just a stunt. You know what I mean? I think it was an expression of a certain, his emotional state of mind at that time. But as I said, he didn't actually do it at the time he said he would, because he wound up going to jail for a period of time. And then when he came out, you know, I think his career took a different direction in a sense with the Murder Junkies.
Yes. So, Mike, were there any other works you have out there that you've done in the past where the listeners could find? Do you have a website for these other works, or for yourself?
Good question. I haven't done any serious work on music history before this. To tell you the truth, for about 30 years, I've been a film historian studying movie history, particularly in New York. And I've written tons of liner notes and done lots of commentary tracks, as they call them, for DVDs, and introduced all kinds of screenings and written some academic type articles, you know. I also have a book coming out about an obscure filmmaker I won't go into, but that's a book that I've had in the works for years that will also be coming out in the next few years. Low budget filmmaker who was based here in New York, who made what they used to call sexploitation movies, if anybody wants to look that up. And I became very close to people who worked in that world. I even know a lot of people who worked in porno in New York in the 70s when porno first started. That's all stuff I've been researching. So that's most of my background. But ironically, when I was a kid, 1981, or it was really January of 82, a couple of friends and I were making a zine. You know, we listened to all the new music at that time, including GG Allin when he was just emerging. And one of my friends who was helping to produce the zine was in a band, and they had played a gig, you know, shared a bill with the GG Allin and the Jabbers. And so I wanted to write articles about new bands, and he said, "Oh, check these guys out." So to make a long story short, I went to a GG Allin and the Jabbers show in January of 1982 in Manchester, New Hampshire, at this little hole-in-the-wall club. Real interesting place.
Dive bar?
Dive bar, yeah. Although a lot of bands from Boston went up and played there. You know, if you came up to Manchester from Boston, which is only an hour away, you know, a lot of well-known bands from Boston played there. But at any rate, I saw GG for the one and only time, you know, that night. And actually, I went to his apartment before the show, met his wife, met him. He was the young, handsome, normal GG that people remember. But that show was still crazy. He crawled around on the floor. people threw drinks on him. I remember a beer bottle bouncing off the neck of his bass player's guitar and making this incredible boom sound. And then one drunk guy, and he was, believe me, the people in this bar were not punks. They were local working class people, probably just getting drunk after working in a factory. This drunk guy was like, "You suck, get off the stage." And Gigi said, "Come up here and tell me that." And the guy said, "I'm going to piss on you." The guy was really drunk. He seemed like a nice guy in a way. And Gigi said, "Go ahead." And the guy literally got up, unzipped, and pissed all over Gigi's leg.
Oh, like a dog.
Which Gigi loved, right, Spike? He thought that was funny and awesome. So that was the show. And I wrote a long article about it. And as weird as this seems, 40 plus years later, it's probably the first comprehensive description of a GG Allin show that anybody ever wrote. And maybe we published 100 copies of that zine, and there are still a few of them floating around, but you can actually find that article online.
And the publisher's called, what's the name of the publisher again?
Well, it's on a website that a guy I'm friendly with maintains, Madman of Manchester, which is what Gigi was calling himself early on. And this guy has done a wonderful job of documenting all of Gigi's early gigs, his early recordings, and early articles about him. So if you want to go to Madman of Manchester, you can see that article that I wrote, and it was published in a zine called The Times. We took the New York Times and we cut New York out and just used The Times. And my pseudonym for writing in that article was Dwight Trash. Dwight Trash. And so nobody knew who wrote it for 40 years. And then a few years back, somebody emailed me saying, "Hey, man, are you Dwight Trash? Are you the guy who wrote that article?" And it's what turned me on to this whole project, collecting Gigi's story, because I realized so many people are still interested in him. And when I started to meet some people who knew him really well back in the day, I realized he was well-liked, even loved by these people. And there was a story to be told, right, Spike, that hadn't been told yet. There are, by the way, a couple of very good books out there, you know, documenting pieces of Gigi's career. Yeah. One of them that came out very recently, and people can check those out as well. You know, they're kind of like diaries mostly of tours with him and stuff, but they're incredibly useful, and I would look for those. But no one has put together what I'd call a comprehensive book about his whole life, and that's what I'm trying to do now.
Well, that is good. I look forward to when you get this out. And well, thank you for being on the show, Mike. You know?
It's my pleasure. It's fun to talk about the book at this stage. And you know, it's the summer of 2025, so about a year from now the book will be out there. And I hope people will check it out. People have been incredibly generous contributing to it, and I'm grateful to all of them. And I think Gigi's story needs to be told. He was a much more complex guy than maybe younger people realize.
Yeah.
And an interesting guy and a nice guy. Here's a quick story. He stayed at the house of some kid, right? Who was still living at home. And in the morning he got up and the kid's mother made him breakfast, and Gigi helped her wash the dishes, and she thought he was the nicest guy she ever met.
Wow.
That's, you know, that's the kind of, there are different facets of GG Allin for sure.
No doubt. That is all right. Punk, rock, and beyond on whatever 68radio.net. DJ Spike the Light. That's it.